Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. Welcome.
All right, guys. Today's date, October 22nd, 2022, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your most Will Buchanan on How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we do get started, guys, let you know that we are a family-friendly podcast, as we try to be, and sometimes there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so if your discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, what do we have this weekend? Well, we do kind of have some good news, I guess you could call it that. I won't say it's good news. It's more like the chickens have come home to roost. Steve Bannon, as of yesterday, was sentenced to 4 months in prison for defying a subpoena. This is probably the first time in a long time that someone actually did get some jail time for not answering the subpoena. The subpoena was coming from the January 6th committee that is still investigating the events of January 6th, and Steve Bannon, beyond all shadow of doubts, did have a hand in it, was actually found guilty of contempt because he did not follow the subpoena. What does that basically mean? Well, he's basically sentenced to 4 months behind bars, $6,500 fine in the District of Columbia. Bannon will be allowed to appeal before that sentence. He was convicted on He was convicted on 2 counts of contempt of Congress for ignoring subpoenas. And I was surprised when it said prosecutors asked the judge to sentence Bannon up to 6 months in jail with a $200,000 fine. Keep in mind, it's the same guy that was behind, I guess you can call him one of the chief strategists behind Trump, as far as the whole building the wall, saying that we need to go after certain ethnic races, if you will, and himself as a known nationalist. I'm not saying, 4 months is, I'm thinking to myself, if we're really trying to set an example, 4 months is really kind of a slap on the wrist. $6,500, that man definitely does have the money to pay for that. But at the same time, it's almost feels like it's a slap on the wrist. I don't get me wrong. I do believe an example had to be made, considering the fact that the January 6th Commission just now subpoenaed former failure-in-chief Donald Trump, and we're going to see whether or not he answers that subpoena. But it is nice to know that there is some sort of action that is going to happen if you don't comply with subpoenas, because for the longest time with a lot of these Trump associates, nobody was following subpoenas. They said, "Oh, I'm going to defy it. I'm not going to go there for what?" And correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time somebody has actually went to prison over it. So yes, for all those that know about subpoenas, there is a reason why you don't ignore them. You could go to jail. Moving right along, guys, I did want to cover this story. This is basically an update from the midweek review about a school in Missouri that was right next to a radioactive creek that had bomb wastewater from World War II dumped into it decades ago, and that radioactive levels were found on the school playground, in the classrooms, right next to the water source. And yet the Army Corps of Engineers, and one very, very resistant parent, was trying to get the actual reports of these levels to be seen. The Army Corps of Engineers said, well, there's really nothing to worry about right now. Everything's fine. And that we're monitoring on a day-by-day basis, even though they have been at this site since World War II trying to clear this up. Well, we actually got an update on that. That school is now being closed. I wonder why.
A Missouri senator is asking President Biden to declare a federal emergency after radioactive waste was found at an elementary school near St. Louis. Tests show the contamination from a nearby river is everywhere, from the classrooms to the cafeteria. The school is now being shut down, but some parents are accusing the school board of waiting too long to inform them of the potential danger.
Says a lot, doesn't it? It is amazing that, yes, I hate to say it, when you look at, and I say this, it's not just Missouri. It's just not Missouri. Keep in mind, I've said this about southern states a lot. I've said this about Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Missouri, Louisiana, and Texas. I have said this so many times. What it is, the infrastructure in the South is woefully in need of repair. There are so many environmental issues that are going on in so many areas. It's frightening. And the fact of the matter is that one story about one school having high levels of radiation, and yet kids were allowed to go there, play there, eat there, and be exposed to it. Even now that the school district is now being closed because of it. So, yes, if I was a parent that had someone at that school, yes, I would ask a whole bunch of questions. How long have you known? Is my child affected? I wouldn't be surprised if lawsuits followed. Because again, this that whole situation of how long did you know it was a problem and how long did you ignore it until it got national attention? And then once it got national attention, then you're like, oh crap, we must do something about this because lawsuits are coming. And trust me, there's going to be a few parents that are going to look at that school district. And yes, I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, lawsuits will be coming. So, moving right along, guys, again, we do understand about Twitter being purchased by Elon Musk, the whole back and forth. But yes, he finally decided to go ahead and pull the trigger. And I guess the Twitter board agreed to do with that. Board of directors agreed with that. However, there is a story going about that there is a possibility that he may have told potential investors that he planned to cut 75% of the company's staff once he takes over. Of course, Twitter is telling their staff, don't worry about it. It's all just, and I wish I could make this up, rumors. Where, again, if it's rumors, why not just ask the man himself? Look, we all know that Elon Musk, a guy who was born into a rich family that had a diamond mine, who took over Tesla and basically made that into a billion-dollar powerhouse, who, pays nothing in taxes, but yet is able to amass enough capital to where he's about to pick up one of the biggest social media areas one of the three big. I call them the big three. I mean, if you really think about it, well, actually four, because you got to think Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Even though Snapchat's also a very arguable medium, but still, the fact of the matter is he's about to pick up an area to where, number one, Twitter is very influential. We see that because everybody uses it. At the same time, it would be remiss not to sit there and say he's not going to monetize the crap out of it. But I don't know why people think, above all else, that he will not cut staff, because that's what they do. He just deposited $44 billion to get this. He wants to make his money back in the quickest way possible. Why are we surprised? And let's be honest, and this is me speaking from experience, really speaking from experience, whenever there is a merger or a buyout or a takeover, the people that's always the first to go is staff. Now, depending on your levels of staff, sometimes the lowest ones go, sometimes the highest ones go, sometimes it's a mix of both. But yes, to sit there and call it rumors, that just keeps the people from looking for jobs while you're staying more trying to figure out how to tell them they may no longer have jobs. Because consider the fact that Microsoft just laid out 1,000 workers. 1,000 workers Microsoft laid off with no issue. This is why I keep saying, guys, all the time, there is no such thing as corporate loyalty. There really is not. And if you think that there is, you are sadly mistaken. Companies will cut you and say it's a sound business decision, but will turn around and say, when you're doing it for yourself, you're not that reliable of an employee. There's no such thing as corporate loyalty. Do whatever you need to do. So for all those that are at Twitter, hey, you see the writing on the wall, time to go. But moving right along, guys, we did want to go back to Uvalde, Texas. I know it is amazing to me that when we think about Uvalde, Texas, when we think about the shooter, when we think about the officers that were held up for 70 plus minutes for breaching, right? Now, keep in mind, chief police already gone, resigned. And yet we're still getting stories of officers whose actions are questionable, which goes back to the whole question I've been saying the entire time. Why in the blue are some of these people who are there still allowed to serve?
Cobb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, where nearly 400 law enforcement responded to a deadly school shooting last May, CNN has learned commands by a high-ranking state police officer may have contributed to the broader failed response that day. While a gunman sat in a room full of dead, dying, and traumatized children, new police radio transmissions obtained by CNN show Texas Department of Public Safety Captain Joel Betancourt given an order to stop police from entering the classroom. And one internal memo describes him before he arrives telling officers to stay away from the school and remain on the perimeter during the initial response to the shooting. Captain Betancourt was one of 91 DPS officers on scene in Uvalde. We are now learning he is one of the 7 referred for further investigation over his actions. After lionizing the police response in the initial days, the Texas governor and state officials have pushed the blame for what has since been acknowledged as a failure on the local and school police. But CNN has now reviewed memos written just 2 days after the shooting that detail actions by the DPS that allegedly went against protocol for mass shootings. One lieutenant wrote, "I heard someone shout out Captain Betancourt said all DPS personnel need to be on perimeter. Do not enter the building." And a sergeant reported he knew this was clearly against established training, and so he entered the school anyway. By the time Betancourt says he arrived outside Robb Elementary, students and teachers had already been trapped for more than an hour. Some at the scene, like this Border Patrol medic, are aware of the urgency inside the classroom.
No, we hadn't heard that. No, we're in the 4s, right? This is building 4.
Anybody hurt?
No, not here. No, sir. Here?
Yeah. EMS in there already? No, sir. We have the shooter in there.
Yeah.
He's in here.
He's in here. Yeah.
I'm just gonna stand right here. Be ready. The last contact. Hey, hold on. Last contact we had was one of our school PD officers. His wife is a teacher. She called him saying she's not. They just had a kid in room 12. Yeah, they had a kid in room 12. Most of the victims room 12.
A Border Patrol tactical unit is preparing to end the standoff and storm the classroom.
Yes, making breach. Come in.
In a move that sources tell CNN has shocked people inside DPS, Betancourt picked up his radio and tried to stop the breach.
Hey, this is DPS Captain Betancourt. You guys gonna make breach? You need to stand by. The team that's gonna breach, you need to stand by.
The transmission can be clearly heard on several body-worn cameras inside and outside the hallway of Robb Elementary. The tactical unit was already making entry.
Subject down.
Kids! The shooter is killed and a devastating scene is revealed inside the classroom. In an interview with investigators that has been detailed to CNN, Betancourt said he did not know there were any children in the building until after the breach. That's despite 911 calls from children inside the room. Betancourt says he was relying on information from Uvalde Sheriff Ruben Velasco that the gunman was a barricaded subject and no longer an active shooter, and that a better SWAT team was on its way. He admits he never spoke to former school police chief Pete Arredondo, who has been labeled the on-scene commander, until after the shooter was killed. The memo referencing Betancourt's actions and another corroborating it are some of the clearest evidence that questions are being raised internally at the Department of Public Safety about the actions of its officers. His orders over the radio contradict the official narrative that the state police were never in command of the scene and never issued substantive orders. When questioned by CNN in September, DPS Director Colonel Steve McCraw confirmed the investigation into Betancourt and promised to resign if his agency was shown to have culpability for the botched response.
Was there a body cam? There's apparently footage of him inside the hallway telling people not to breach that door. Have you heard that?
I've heard a lot of things. Okay,
but is there any credibility?
I don't know
that?
if there is or not. But that's one of the reasons why we're doing the investigation. Okay.
No, I know.
So,
Okay. Listen,
and we're going to be thorough.
And let me just explain something to you. I don't want to do this.
I'll be the first to resign. Okay. I'll be gladly resign. I'll tender my resignation to the governor. Okay. If I think there's any culpability on the Department of Public Safety, period. Okay. But we're going to hold our officers accountable. No one gets a pass, but every officer is going to be held accountable in that regard.
But you are looking at this Captain Betancourt for information that you have that he may have told officers not to go in the hallway.
Yes, absolutely.
How is Betancourt responding to
So
it?
he hasn't, Anderson. This is something we've been working on for quite some time. We had heard.
And the messed up part is you're not going to get it. I mean, I hate to keep going back to the situation. I hate to keep going back to saying that we're studying more, looking at this and horrified, because now we did know, for the simple fact of the matter, there was a group that was border patrol, the border patrol attack group was ready to say, you know what, F this, we're going in. And then you have an officer that comes on there and says, well, no, don't go in. You see, and that's why I said I can't hold every officer there responsible. But when you see officers getting frustrated, like this is taking too long, we need to go in and subdue the subject, and you're being told to wait, I can see that. I can see how that's frustrating. But those are in command are the ones that hold the highest responsibility. And for the longest time, we all thought the chief of police, who was the commanding officer at the time, was the sole person. And now you're hearing other people come forward. And I'm just like, that we're almost 2 months past. We're almost a month and a half past when that happened. So it's like, how much of an investigation do you have to do? Because it sounds more like you're protecting DPS than actually holding these officers accountable. Because that's why I like the fact that the director comes out and says, he's like, look, if I'll be the first one to resign, yeah, looks like that actually may be you. Because how else can you explain the lack of inactivity on your guys' side when it is fairly obvious, the more video we watch, the more we see the inactivities of some officers, the frustrations of a lot of officers, and the commanding officers, well, they still get their pensions. Just saying, it's messed up. But some of the quick news I did want to cover, guys. I did want to cover this story as well, especially Jackson, Mississippi, and their water crisis. The EPA is finally launching a civil rights investigation into it. I called it that it was bound to happen just because of the water situation, that it's not just because of the flooding and their treatment plants that were going down. Again, this goes back to what I said about the infrastructure of southern states. Mississippi is woefully is in need of a lot of repair and upgrades. And the fact that the EPA is now looking into civil rights, looking into federal civil rights investigation into this, hopefully will definitely not only begin the conversation, but change the narrative. I mean, forget Flint. I mean, we can't forget Flint, Michigan. We cannot forget other areas that were devastated, but we come to find out that the water, how water is filtered and our drinking supplies are affected. Things need to change. This is why the EPA, for what we have it for, is effective. And again, all those in the state council and legislature should be held accountable. That's just how I feel about it. Also, guys, remember the story I talked about last week about the LA council that got caught, saying some questionable things? And what I mean by questionable things, I mean talking about the interracial child of one of its council people. Remember when one of them said that they would resign? Yeah, the other one didn't. That man that you see right there, Kevin De Leon, will not be resigning despite the public outcry of his conversation that he had regarding one of his constituents' children. Now, if Audacity had a fire sale, it would be this gentleman here. Because how in the world do you sit there and you do this? And this was his comment. He goes, I'm so sorry to the city of LA for not stepping up and being the leader they would expect me to be. I am sorry to my constituents. I am sorry to my colleagues. I am sorry to the family of Mike Bonin, the person he insulted. To my family, to all those who have supported me. No, the public wants you gone. You work for the public. Therefore, pack your bags. But again, it's not like he can't be recalled anyway, because that's the ability of the people. But it amazes me so that these people think that they did nothing wrong, and at the same time think that it's completely okay to still resume what they're doing. It's amazing to me. It really truly is. But we know what else is amazing? Who in this day on their 2022 bingo board had Kanye West? I usually try not to talk about him. I try not to talk about him because number one, the guy's a troll. Number two, he does things for attention. Number three, well, check number two. most recent tirades though were anti-Semitic. He was going to go DEFCON 3 on all Jews. Well, it seems that he doubled down on that because usually when you say something anti-Semitic, apologies and a public apology tour follows. Not Kanye. He doubled down.
Is digging in, issuing a non-apology apology in a new interview after his anti-Semitic, anti-Black comments. Listen to this.
My question for you is, do you now regret saying DEFCON 3 on Jewish people? Are you sorry you said that?
No.
I don't think it matters. You should be.
Absolutely not. I will say I'm sorry for the people that I hurt with the DEFCON, the confusion that I call. I feel like I caused hurt and confusion. And I'm sorry for the families of the people that had nothing to do with the trauma that I had been through, and that I use my platform where you say hurt people, and I was hurt.
Joining me now is LZ Granderson. He's a columnist for the LA Times, the host of the ABC podcast Life Out Loud. He also writes about this very issue in his new column titled Kanye West's Life and Art Are One. You don't have to keep watching. LZ, your column is fantastic on this, exactly why I wanted to have you on to dig into it. But first, what is your reaction to this apology that is not an apology from Kanye West?
It's more of the same. And it's really typical of people who don't want to be held accountable for their actions, right? Like they may acknowledge some wrongdoing in very general terms, but they never actually acknowledge the wrongdoings and take personal responsibility for it. And then in that answer, I just heard more of the same of that from Kanye.
Yeah. Let me read a part of your piece that really struck me. I tell everyone they really should go read the whole thing. You write, year by year, track by track, sneaker by sneaker, tweet by tweet. He shows us why we should follow and why we should tune out. Like so many people, I kept finding ways to carve the artistry from the artist, even though I knew they were one and the same. Then one day I just stopped. I didn't cancel him. I didn't suggest anyone else cancel him. I just stopped. It just stopped working for me. Talk to me about how you got to this place, LZ.
It was hard. I'm a Gen X Black guy from Detroit. So hip hop has always been present in my life growing up. It shaped my worldview in a lot of ways. And it continues to shape my worldview because these artists, these rappers, they aren't just entertainers and musicians. They're also storytellers and are griots. They're supposed to help document what happens in the world, as all artists are supposed to do. But in hip hop, it's particularly important to Black people. And so I wanted to talk about this journey because to see Kanye go down this path also hurts me as a hip hop fan because I used to love you. I used to love his music. I could not wait for the next track like a lot of people. But there comes a point in which you need to understand that you're supporting everything else that goes with it. If you watch a Woody Allen film, you may enjoy Woody Allen, but he's got some issues, right? Same thing with Michael Jackson, same thing with R. Kelly. We all have the personal responsibility of asking ourselves, is this working for me? What this person, what this artist is doing in addition to the artistry, is this working for me? And when you got to Kanye, I just arrived at no.
But you say specifically that you're not telling people to cancel him. You just don't listen to him. And just pose the question to yourself, is it working for you? Others, though, are saying he needs to be canceled. Mega agent Ari Emanuel wrote in the Financial Times that companies need to stop working with him because he has not gone the path of really showing that he is apologetic, writing this: those who continue to do business with West are giving his misguided hate an audience. There should be no tolerance anywhere for West's anti-Semitism. What do you think of that, LZ?
I agree. There should not be any tolerance for West's anti-Semitism. However, that's a personal thing. And I think that the best thing that I could do with my platform is not to tell people what to think about Kanye, but to ask themselves, are they taking the time to think what they think about Kanye? In other words, don't just check the box by saying, oh, he's just being himself. Really listen to what he's saying. Really understand how he's using his platform in the context of a post-2020 America with everything that we know that's going on in terms of hate crimes, in terms of anti-Semitism, in terms of racism. There's a major issue in Los Angeles right now when you think about the racism with the city council. So we're in a climate right now that's very, very tense. And what Kanye is flirting with isn't necessarily helping. And so I ask people, the cancel movement thing, you can't cancel someone as big and as powerful as Kanye. I think that's a silly conversation to have to begin with. But what you can do is ask individual leaders and fans of his, Do you appreciate, do you support what he's doing right now with this platform?
Okay, so for the simple fact of the matter, guys, I do agree with that to a certain extent. The only thing about Kanye is the fact that, like I said before, he's a troll. He wants attention. If you give him attention, it's almost like he won. It's a game. It's like as long as he gets attention, he's happy. He won. He'll keep going with it. The problem is, though, is just that, when you do when you do comments about, you do DEFCON 3 on Jewish people, when you sit there and say that kind of stuff, how, Jews aren't the real Jewish people, Jews aren't the black people. What kills me? He's not the first person to say that. And I'm just like, as a person who loves history, I just have to ask this question. Where do y'all get that? I mean, I do believe that everything can be explained, everything can have an honest conversation, and maybe you can explain your point. Maybe you can articulate it to where you just don't say something off the wall just for shock value. But in his case, he doesn't say anything that just remotely sounds ideological. It just sounds stupid. Even more so, it's almost hate speech. So yes, he didn't apologize. He's like, "Well, I'm just speaking my truth," it's the one thing I say so much about free speech. You have the right to say whatever it is that you want, but you are not absolved of the consequences that follow once you say it. Why do you think the longest time, well, when you're playing the Dirty Dozens or y'all roasting each other, if you say your mama, it turns to fighting words? That is the greatest example of free speech right there. You say a mama joke, the other guy burns him so bad he's ready to fight you. Your free speech, also your consequence. That freaking simple. Kanye is, but the thing about it is, as much as everybody understands that concept, it's the concept that the former failure in chief had, to where he said anything he wanted to say, had zero consequence. And that is the fantasy. The fantasy of anything you want to do or say and nothing happens to you. That's the fantasy. Trump did it for so long that people thought they could do it too. Even Kanye's dumbass, Candace Owens' dumbass, the rest of the raccoon community, they all thought the same thing because you're speaking your truth. But I get the fact that whatever you say is probably going to offend someone. That's just the way of the world. There's no such thing as perfect speech. Whatever you say is going to offend somebody somewhere. Just like you being a likable person. If you are a likable person among many, I guarantee there's going to be one or two that don't like you for no other reason except for you. And it's going to mess with you. But that's the way of the world. But what we can control is what we say, because we have to be prepared for what else comes with it. Kanye is doing this for attention. That's why I like what LZ Granderson said. He said, don't give it attention. If you don't give it attention, if you don't entertain it, then guess what? Eventually it goes away, because it's a troll. It's like trolling is like fire. The more oxygen you get to this fire, the longer it burns. But if we simply smother it and don't give it attention, it eventually dies out. But like I said, with Kanye, can't be surprised. But anyway, moving right along, guys, I did want to cover this story as well, because we did cover this in the midweek review about Governor DeSantis and his election police force crimes in the unit. When he thought he could find all this multiple counts of election fraud and illegal voting, and he only found 20 people in 5 counties. Yeah, those actual felons, former felons, who thought their rights were restored by Amendment 4 are now fighting back. And again, when you look at it, do you really blame the felons for everything they've been told? Because from all intents and purposes, it's DeSantis' administration that's the problem, not the felons.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' crackdown on alleged voter fraud after video shows both the former felons and the officers arresting them equally confused by the arrests. The defendants feel blindsided. They had no idea that they were not eligible to vote after voting rights for some felons, but not all, were restored in Florida. Now they're speaking out to CNN. Leila Santiago is live for us in Miami with more. Part of the confusion is they were able to register to vote, and they were listening to instructions about being able to vote here, Leila.
That's correct, Brianna. You know, we've spoken to about 4 of these arrested individuals, and when I talked to them, they're pretty quick to admit to what they called big mistakes from their past, but they also are quick to mention they served their time, felt they paid their debt to society, and thought that the changes in the law here in Florida gave them the right to vote again until the arrests.
A hard, conniving slap in the face by the state of Florida.
That's what Ron Miller says he felt when he was accused of voter fraud. He was one of more than a dozen arrested as part of a far-reaching state operation to crack down on supposed voter fraud in Florida, arrests that left many confused.
Voter fraud? I voted, but I ain't commit no fraud. What is wrong with this state, man? What are you talking about, voter fraud? What's this for about?
A newly released body camera video, first reported by the Tampa Bay Times, gives a fresh glimpse of the confusion and the many questions from those arrested.
These folks voted illegally. They are disqualified from voting because they've been convicted of either murder or sexual assault.
It wasn't my mistake that was made. I trusted in the state of Florida to let me know what's going on. And they failed me.
He says he thought he was allowed to vote. Miller has a list of convictions under his name, including second-degree murder. But he tells us he's tried to stay out of trouble since his release. And then in October of 2020, he tells us he was approached by someone registering voters at the grocery store who told Miller he could restore his voting rights. Miller signed off on the registration, and then this voter ID came in the mail a few weeks later, just in time for the November 2020 election.
I was happy that I was able to vote again. Wow.
So he voted, he says, even kept his I voted sticker. But then 2 years later,
they were like this at my door.
In 2018, nearly 2/3 of voters passed Amendment 4 in Florida. It restored voting rights for those convicted of felonies, not including murder or felony sex offenses. Legal battles ensued, confusion spread, voting eligibility remained unclear for many.
As if I had robbed a bank or something.
Adam Goodman is the attorney defending Nathaniel Singleton, also among those arrested.
It seems kind of improper that the government is saying, hey, go ahead and do this. We got you. Now you're in trouble. It seems like they're taking advantage of people.
In Florida, state law requires the state to notify local supervisors of elections about voters convicted of a felony or not eligible to vote. In the 5 counties where these voter fraud arrests occurred, local election officials tell CNN the state did not inform them the arrested individuals were not eligible to vote before they cast a ballot in 2020.
Why is y'all doing this now and this happened years ago?
I don't know. I have no idea, man.
This is crazy, man.
I think it's not coincidental that these arrests occurred right before the midterm elections.
A voting rights expert we talked to called this a political ploy.
The danger, as I see it, is that it's intimidating and that it is voter suppression. It is, I think, designed and targeted at lower income voters who also disproportionately tend to be men and women of color.
For Ron Miller, he wants nothing to do with the election process anymore after the arrest.
I want them to drop the charges on me and just leave me alone.
As for Miller, for now, he is pleading not guilty, plans to file a motion to dismiss, hoping to get before the court tomorrow. But ultimately, Brianna, he calls this a setback. He now has to figure out how he's going to pay someone back who helped him pay for that bond. For Governor DeSantis and his administration, they are standing by.
And that's the intended effect. Really and truly, that's the intended effect. I do agree with the professor in this. This is pretty much voter suppression because number one, you go after them 2 years later. Number two, 20 people in 5 counties. Not really a big alarm for setting up an entire new law enforcement division to go after voter fraud. And number three, they were all given voter ID cards. So the problem is not with the felons, but again, the whole intended effect is to voter suppress them. I mean, Amendment 4 passed, and certain felons under certain conditions and restrictions, certain conditions and rights should have had their rights restored. It should be easy peasy. But, and I say but, because people believe that, okay, since you paid your debt to society, you've done your time, you've paid off whatever restitutions you need to pay off, that you can't go back to being a normal citizen, that you still have to wear your scarlet letter somewhere, and that your rights have to be taken away from you. So again, with people that were so excited about being back in the vote, trying to be normal, productive citizens, and then that happens. Guns back in your face, arrested. Officers can't tell you why you're arrested because all you do is get warrants held by the same administration that gave you the same voter ID card in the first place. That's where I said that's bullshit. Because how in the world would a former felon at that, would vote if he's given a voter ID card? If they're given a voter ID card, shouldn't they have been told, I'm sorry, you're ineligible to vote? If DeSantis' administration that he's so effing proud of, yet that same administration is handing out voter ID cards to felons, enticing them to vote. And in doing so, they voted happily, proudly. And now you got guys just like that man who says, just drop the charges, I'll never vote again. Congratulations. You have just figured out a way of voter suppression by basically setting up the board, causing the fire, coming back and saying who started the fire, and then giving yourselves a pat on the back for putting out the same fire that you created. This is why Governor DeSantis needs to go. His administration, he'll do one thing while he does another. At the same time, they don't blame the process themselves. They blame the felons. Why? Because at this point, anything red is almost believable. I mean, it is. I mean, just being honest with you. Anything conservative base is always believable. Ron DeSantis has an overwhelming conservative base in Florida. That's why it'll be hard for anybody that's running against him to actually dethrone him. At the same time, former failure in chief depends heavily on Governor DeSantis, at least for now, and as he's ducking his multiple lawsuits. But imagine the fact that you're a felon that's just trying to get back on the right track, and this sets you back. And yet they wonder why the system needs to change. Makes no sense, doesn't it? But last story before we get to our feel-good segment, guys, I did want to cover this because Biden is currently doing, I won't say a victory lap. He's currently making the rounds, trying to get people to vote as early voting has started. I can tell you in Tennessee, early voting has started. Definitely check out your state's voting site to see when early voting will start, when the early polling places. I highly recommend early voting because it is by far quicker to get the lines versus waiting on election day. That's just my recommendation. But definitely vote. I understand the candidates you're voting for, but please go vote. No action is just simply not going to cut this time. But that being said, Biden is also talking about the deficit and that we're $1.4 trillion in the right direction.
Defending his economic plan just 18 days ahead of Election Day, saying Republicans would make the economy worse.
Today, my administration announced that this year, the deficit fell by $1.4 trillion, the largest one-year drop in American history, $1.4 trillion decline in the deficit. Let me repeat that, the largest ever decline in the federal deficit. Let me be clear. This record deficit reduction includes the cost of my student loan plan and everything else we're paying for.
ABC's Alex Prochet joins me now from Washington. So, Alex, we were listening together. We heard about President Biden speaking about that decline in the deficit. We know that is in large part to tax revenues being higher and spending on COVID being lower. So this was, in theory, a speech about the U.S. economy, but because of timing, we're so close to midterm elections. In some cases, it was more of a political speech. What's your take, Alex?
Well, absolutely, Deirdre. I think you hit the nail on the head. And, I've done some traveling in the last couple of weeks from Wisconsin to Georgia to Florida. There's not a single race that I have covered where a Republican has not tried to link their Democratic opponent to the president and to inflation and to the economy. So this was very much a pushback against all of that, right? The president trying to essentially get ahead in these last 18 days ahead of this midterm election, saying that he believes that the pendulum is going to swing back Democratic Democrats' way, touting unemployment being at a 50-year low, the deficit falling at $1.4 trillion, and also gas prices being down in recent days.
Alex, picking up on what you just said about inflation, and I'm reading through the notes that I made here on the president's comments saying, keep the faith. We will get through this difficult time with inflation. Is this really the biggest boogeyman that the Democrats have going up against them for these midterm contests?
It is certainly the thing. When I talk to Republican voters, it's a thing that they bring up the most often. Inflation, the price of providing for their family as compared to a year or 2 years ago, that is number one. And so I think for a lot of these moderate voters, yes, that is probably the biggest boogeyman, right? I mean, there are a couple of other issues that Democrats kind of have going for them. They're at least able to rally people around. I mean, you think about abortion and codifying Roe, which is something that the president talked about doing in his speech in Pennsylvania yesterday. Also, you know, the student debt forgiveness is also going to be something else that kind of galvanizes young voters. But inflation continues in our polling to be issue number one, or at least 1B. And for a lot of these voters, that's going to be the make or break issue.
Alex Pichet, thank you as always.
I mean, I can understand to a certain point, but I also have to point this out as well. What the Democrats aren't doing is they're not pushing things that they should have done beforehand. I know it's going to sound like the Biden's run, but yes, conservatives are going to hit you on inflation. That's all they know. Conservatives only hit on the things that are not working well in the country because they have no answer for it. So of course they're going to hit back on inflation. But you know what, Democrats, I always said this before, it's like, even though I'm not there, I consider myself Democratic, I damn sure don't consider myself conservative. I like myself as independent progressive. But Democrats could push the fact that we need to make minimum wage higher. Democrats could push on the fact of codifying Roe versus Wade and really signing off on it. Democrats could push forward on really having a more progressive agenda as far as, you know, things that should have been done beforehand. You know, getting a Voting Rights Act in, actually really going more forward in the prescription drug coverage, even though they've made a lot of great strides. But they could do a lot of things. And I said what, and honestly, making marijuana legal along with raising the minimum wage, those are two landslides to get our economy back in the right direction. Will they choose to do that? Well, in a moderate group, no, because I've said before, moderate Democrats are basically Republican-like. Just enough to be considered Republican, but just a few degrees to the left to actually be considered left. That's what moderates are. Moderates are just basically really, really bougie conservatives. But unfortunately, that was Biden. Fortunately, some of those are in the Senate. More progressive ones are in the House. And so, but again, unless the Democrats get on the same page, because that's the one thing I will say above all else that Republicans do so very freaking well, that when it comes down to it, they will toe the party line. And if you go against them, it's like the mafia. You're out. But we will see. But I highly encourage people, please go vote. Whether you early vote or vote on election day, please go vote. Now, with that being said, guys, we're going to take it to our feel-good segment. Because usually on the Frack out here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes we lose faith in humanity. But hey, it's the weekend. Hopefully winter is coming. And you're nice and safe and bundled up. But we do want to leave you guys with a couple of good feel-good stories, some good vibrations. And again, this one is involving what a teacher does as far as getting kids to school and the use of a bicycle. And this is why I say educators definitely don't get paid enough to be the miracle workers that they are.
Remember being in a bike gang when you were a kid? Well, every Wednesday morning in the Portland Public School District,
let's get some bells going!
A small trickle of bikes forms around 8 a.m.
Hello! When I say bike, you say bus! Bike! Bus! Bike! Bus!
They call it the bike bus, and as it begins to flow through the neighborhood, it gathers strength. Teacher Sam Balto is out front. Soon, a massive river of riders has formed. And that is when the feelings begin to overflow. On Wednesdays, the normal bus is mostly empty.
How do you convince parents that it's possible to go from one bus to a bike?
We underestimate how much children love being social. Rain or shine, you know, they're motivated to see their buddies.
The effect on them is clear.
they're so excited for it, and it gets them up.
It's sort of like you're in a parade. Just get really excited. At first was kind of hard for me, but I think I've gotten more used to it. I'm usually in the front or the middle with all my friends.
I could tell you here about the emissions saved by the bike bus, that it takes hundreds of cars off the road, and that it is very Portland. But the thing that sticks after so much stress and sorrow and loneliness the last few years is watching all these kids floating to school on a vast ocean of joy. Jake.
And again, I thought that was pretty cool, because how else do you ensure doing a lot of things in one shot? Number one, you just cut down fuel for a lot of people, not just schools, but cars as well. You've cut down emissions because, of course, bikes don't give off, bikes don't give off emissions. At the same time, you're including a physical aspect as well as a social construct to where a whole bunch of kids are just excited to get on their bikes and ride them to school. Effing genius. But this, again, is the reason why I have a soft spot in my heart for educators. They simply can make something about learning or getting you to learn fun and inviting, and it pulls you in. That's why I always say every chance I get, I love teachers, because number one, they are freaking magicians, and number two, they definitely do not get the recognition and the pay they deserve. But anyway, moving right along to our next feel-good story. Again, I love the story behind this woman and the CEO of her own business. And I keep telling myself the next time I'm in Atlanta, I may actually try this, because I'm not gonna lie, it does kind of look good, even if it's vegan.
Head, Big Dog, and Dance Hall Queen. Those are just some of the menu items that we can safely say on TV from Slutty Vegan. What started as a food truck is now a multi-million-dollar brand with billion-dollar dreams. And our business reporter, Alexis Christoforous, stopped by the new Brooklyn location and sat down with the brain behind it all.
I bring you in with a raunchy name, but then you realize that we are a business around community.
Slutty Vegan is the brainchild of restaurateur Pinky Cole. At the grand opening of her 7th location in Brooklyn, New York, fans lined up around the block for Pinky's unique take on plant-based food. What began 4 years ago as a single vegan food truck in Atlanta has quickly become a cultural phenomenon.
That's Slutty Vegan!
Each new restaurant location strategically chosen.
When I look for locations, they have to check one of these boxes. Either be in a vegan food desert, be in a food desert, not so attractive to developers, or right in the heart of gentrification. We are being the resource that people need.
With a cult following that includes Snoop Dogg, Queen Latifah, and Spike Lee, Slutty Vegan recently caught the attention of Shake Shack founder Danny Meyer's venture firm, which made a $25 million investment in the company. Now, Pinky says she's on a mission to build a billion-dollar brand.
We're looking at the next future billionaire because of the hard work and the effort that I put in. And I hope that when people see me, I resonate with their spirit, and they believe that they can do whatever they want to do because they see me do it.
If Pinky Cole seems to be everywhere, that's because she is. From magazine covers and cookbooks to plant-based ad campaigns and her own Steve Madden sneaker, Cole is reinventing vegan food culture with menu items like Fussy Hussy burgers and Skinny Dipper fried pickles.
There's like an evangelical feel to your restaurant and to what you do here.
And when you walk through the door of this church, we're going to laugh with you. We're going to jump and play with you. The music is booming. The vibe is high. Everything that you're looking for is right here at this place of business.
Raised by a single mother in Baltimore, Maryland, Pinky found her inspiration.
The day that I was born, my father was being sentenced to prison. He ended up serving 22 years in prison. So I grew up in a household with a mother who was a workaholic. Maybe that's where I get it from.
Focused on paying it forward, Pinky says it's not just about the food, it's about community.
When they laugh at that idea that you had, go build that business and come back and make them work for you. Find aspiration in the losses.
After giving this year's commencement speech at her alma mater of Clark Atlanta University, Pinky gifted each of the 834 graduates their own limited liability company, allowing many of them who took her up on it to start their own business.
I'm all about giving back and bringing people up as I climb. I'm confident that there are going to be some $1 million businesses created outside of what I did.
Her Pinky Cole Foundation working to lift up Black and brown communities, handing out fresh fruits and vegetables to underserved neighborhoods, paying rent for struggling businesses, and purchasing life insurance for young Black men.
It's really a way to bridge that generational wealth gap for people who want opportunities, who look like me, and who just want to rise above the status quo.
Teaching the next generation about entrepreneurship by example.
Advice for other people looking to do what you're doing and advice on brand building.
You have to be a disruptor. If you are not a disruptor, then you can't play in this game.
That's that big boy. One sloppy toppy and fussy hussy. Slutty vegan scaling now. Harlem World coming soon.
With the Slutty vegan brand now valued at $100 million, Pinky is crafting a legacy, one vegan burger at a time.
And I just love that. I love to see Black people succeed. That is the one of the many joys I take pride in. And even if it's vegan, I'll still give it a shot. Like I said, if I'm ever in Atlanta or if it ever gets close to me, I'll give it a shot. Can't be that bad. I mean, you're not gonna convert me from eating meat, but hey, still want to support Black businesses. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. I thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here. A shout out to my guy, Vaughn at BigVZA on all socials. Definitely check him out on TikTok, as well as he is back to making beats, so definitely check him out there. Aside from myself, guys, you can find me on almost every social at BlackFox447, as I usually post everything that I watch, I view, or play on. Sometimes gym stuff. I'm kind of been a little bit lax about that, even though I still do push-ups, but I'll definitely get back on that soon. Aside from that, the one thing I'll say about our society, especially I'm speaking to Black people, we have got to unite. We have got to be better. We have got to speak to each other, work with each other, because as you have seen, things are changing. We have been pent up from the pandemic too long not to around and be social. And I'm not asking you to be saints, but say hi, say what's up, how you doing? Let's actually try to be social again. Is all I'm saying. Also, even if you're going to be in high areas, I know, like for me, we're going to be at a con next week. But again, it's one of those things where if you're going to be in an area that's a lot of high traffic, please, oh please, wear a mask, protect yourself. If you're sick or you feel like you're sick, please stay home. Do yourself a favor. Protect yourself so you can protect others. We are still in a pandemic, and unfortunately, the only way we're going to beat this pandemic is we have to keep the numbers down and low. And I mean, I was going to say another joke. Let's just say let's keep it low. Aside from that, guys, the tracker that you see at the bottom, let me make that just a little bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that into your browser, take to my link tree to the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts. How the Frack got here, get bitten, of course, y'all on this podcast. Definitely like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you think. And also any comments that you may have about the stories that we've crossed, or if there's stories that you believe that need to be looked into, please let us know so we can investigate them. That being said, guys, last thing I'll say about how the Frack got here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information allowing you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better in society when we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then. Electing our first Black woman Supreme Court. Electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors. Electing our first Black 4-star military general in the armed services. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up by your paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll all get through this. Peace.